Chapter 1: Infighting. The forest had finally fallen away behind them, its dripping boughs and ghostly mist shrinking to a gray line against the horizon. Morning light spilled across the road, thin and cold, catching on damp armor and the pale edges of steam rising from their cloaks. None of them spoke. They were alive. The silence hung heavier than relief. Izzy's boots scuffed against the stones. Every step felt borrowed, her muscles trembling with that strange lightness that followed terror. The memory of the nymphs clung to her skin like river mist, soft hands, cold voices, the shimmer of eyes that weren't eyes at all. Sirius walked a few paces ahead, calm as ever, the rhythm of his stride unbroken. He carried no sign of strain, no trace of fear, yet the image refused to leave her mind, the way he had looked standing in that cursed pool, water to his waist, eyes fixed on her phantom reflection. The nymphs had worn her face, chestnut hair, gray eyes pale as fog. Naked, unblinking, unreal. And he had looked at them, at her. Heat crept up her neck before she could stop it. She rubbed at the back of her glove, pretending to adjust the strap. Stupid. She was alive because of him, because of Priscilla's fury and his steadiness. And this was where her mind went? Still, the thought lingered, small and dangerous, like an ember that refused to die. Out of everything they could have shown him, their illusions, their temptations, they had chosen her likeness. She bit the inside of her cheek, trying to chase away the smile that wanted to form. Kaelin trailed behind, muttering darkly about rivers and rotten spirits, every few steps kicking at a stone. Priscilla kept to herself, hood drawn, her silence more protective than shy. The faint shimmer of her skin caught the light whenever the wind tugged at her cloak. By the time the path leveled out onto open ground, the tension had thinned enough for the sound of their breathing to replace it. A long exhale, a low grunt, the scrape of metal against leather, small proofs of life after what felt like a narrow brush with death. Sirius stopped at a rise in the road. "We should rest here," he said quietly. No one argued. They stopped beside a narrow stream that wound through the grass like a vein of glass. The water ran fast and clear, whispering over smooth stones. Izzy crouched near the edge, splashing her face, the cold biting her skin and washing away the last traces of the forest's humidity. She stayed there a moment longer than she needed to, letting the water sting her cheeks until they flushed pink. Across the small clearing, Kaelin sat heavily on a fallen log, armor half loosened, using his dagger tip to dig mud from between the plates. Priscilla leaned against a boulder nearby, eyes half-lidded, humming softly to herself, the same tune she'd been humming since morning. The sound was low and even, calm enough to make the silence around it feel less hollow. Izzy stared into the stream. Her reflection wavered, reshaping itself in the current. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw another face looking back, chestnut hair, gray eyes, and the faintest hint of a smile. Her chest tightened. She groaned under her breath, pressing a wet palm to her face. "Pull yourself together," she muttered. Footsteps approached, soft, deliberate. Sirius came into view, crouching beside Kaelin. "How's your arm?" he asked. Kaelin grunted. "Still works." "Good." Sirius's tone carried no edge, but it wasn't quite relaxed either. Kaelin glanced up, brow raised. "You checking in on people now?" "Making sure no one needs my needlework," Sirius said evenly. Kaelin snorted. "Hells, I sure hope not." Sirius didn't answer, just stood, dusting off his gloves, and moved toward Priscilla. Her humming faltered when his shadow crossed hers, though she didn't look up. He paused beside her, silent for a moment before saying quietly, "Thank you." Priscilla's eyes flicked open, meeting his for a moment. She said nothing, only gave a slow, approving nod. The faint curve at the corner of her mouth might have been a smile. Sirius inclined his head slightly and stepped away, the grass whispering under his boots as he made his way to the stream. Izzy was still crouched at the water's edge, trying to look busy with her pack. She heard him approach and stiffened, pretending to adjust her boots. "You all right?" he asked, his voice low. "Fine," she said quickly, too quickly. He studied her for a moment, eyes calm but searching. "Good," he said finally, and knelt to rinse his hands in the stream beside her. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, just alive. The sound of running water filled the space between them, soft and constant. Izzy stole a glance sideways. His reflection rippled beside hers, distorted but unmistakable. Dark hair, sharp jaw, eyes that never seemed to stop watching. She looked away before he could notice. "You're quiet," she murmured. "I could say the same about you. Guess it's catching." Sirius gave the faintest huff of amusement, barely a sound, but enough to make her heart skip. Behind them, Priscilla's humming picked up again, a single low note that rose and fell like a breath. Sirius stayed crouched beside the stream a moment longer, rinsing the last of the dirt from his hands. When he finally straightened, the light caught on the small metal flask at his belt. He twisted the cap and took a slow sip before glancing toward Izzy. "Drink?" he said, holding it out to her. Izzy arched a brow. "You trying to get me drunk in the middle of the road now?" His tone didn't change. "Just thought you might need one." She looked at the flask, then at him, her lips curling into a faint grin. "After what happened last time?" Sirius tilted his head slightly, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Gotta build a tolerance." She slowly pushed the flask gently back toward him. "You can buy me some proper wine in the next town." "Wine?" he echoed, as though testing the word. He gave a small shrug, taking a sip. "I thought I saved you." Izzy laughed under her breath, the sound quiet but genuine. "Then I'll buy the second one." Sirius gave no reply, only that faint, unreadable half-smile that might have meant amusement, and might have meant nothing at all. He capped the flask and turned away, heading back toward Kaylin and Priscilla. Kaylin looked up as he approached. "She finally scare you off?" Sirius didn't answer. He simply handed him the flask in passing. "Your turn." Kaylin blinked, then grinned. "Well, look at that. He does share." Priscilla's hum faded into a small, knowing smile as Sirius sat beside her again. She said nothing, but when their eyes met briefly, she gave him a slight nod, quiet approval that said more than words could. At the stream, Izzy watched them from a distance, a small smile lingering on her lips. For all the chaos behind them, the morning suddenly felt lighter. The in-between. Moonlight poured through the high glass of the throne hall, fractured by the black marble columns that lined its length. Every reflection in the floor shimmered like oil, swallowing the light instead of catching it. The air was thick with incense and something sweeter, perfume, smoke, the faint copper scent of old blood. Celine's heels clicked softly as she walked, the sound carrying in perfect rhythm through the empty vastness. Shadows clung to her like silk, following the curve of her movement. Her gown, dark as spilled ink, trailed behind her in thin, ghost-like folds. The fabric caught against the edges of the crimson carpet that ran the length of the hall, embroidered with sigils long forgotten by the living. The palace was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful. Cold, deliberate, meant to wound. Every surface gleamed, every arch and statue carved in perfect symmetry. But there was rot beneath the polish. You could smell it if you lingered too long. Servants moved only at the edges of the chamber, silent and barefooted, their eyes lowered. None dared meet hers. At the far end of the hall, the throne awaited. Not a chair, but a towering spire of obsidian that seemed to grow from the floor itself. Celine's fingers brushed its arm as she passed. The stone was warm to the touch. "You keep the place colder every season," said a voice behind her, smooth, rich, touched by the gravel of age. She turned her head slightly. The man approaching down the hall moved with the confidence of someone who had long since learned never to bow. Tharn Voss. His hair was gray at the temples, the rest still dark, his build lean and disciplined beneath a black coat trimmed in silver. Lines marked his face, but they hadn't softened it, they'd carved it into something sharper, watchful. His eyes were pale, clever things that smiled even when his mouth did not. "Tharn," Celine said, her tone a purr wrapped in indifference. "You're early." "I make a habit of it." He stopped a few paces from her, inclining his head just enough to honor her without surrendering to it. "It gives me time to admire the decor. It changes every time I visit." Tharn followed at her side, his stride matching hers. "I can't help but notice you've grown indulgent of late. Sending your, pets after the artifact instead of fetching it yourself." Celine didn't slow. "Delegation, dear Tharn. It's a sign of refinement." He gave a soft laugh, polite, musical. "Or of boredom. You risk much for sport. Where would the fun be in that?" Her voice was a silken drawl. "They amuse me. They bleed, they fail, they entertain. Let them chase it a while longer, and if they succeed, well." Tharn's expression remained calm, though his jaw tightened ever so slightly. "Well," he paused, "you risk much, my lady. The others grow impatient. They may not find your humor as endearing as I do." Celine turned her head toward him, her gaze cool and lazy. "The others," she repeated as if tasting the word. "Let them gnaw on their impatience. The artifact isn't going anywhere, and neither are they. Tharn's laughter was quiet, genuine. You make cruelty sound like an art. It is, Celine murmured. You just lack the talent for it. He inclined his head, the faintest glint of respect in his pale eyes. Perhaps. But even the artist must mind her canvas. Celine began walking again, her gown sweeping the floor like shadow. Come, she said. If the others are waiting, let them wait a little longer. I do so love an eager audience. Tharn followed, his voice low but edged with a smile. Of course. Though one day, my lady, someone might make you wait. She laughed softly, not a pleasant sound, but one that curled with promise. Then I hope they're worth the anticipation. The massive doors at the end of the hall opened, spilling a deep red light across the marble. Celine's silhouette cut clean through it as she stepped forward. After you, Tharn, she said, not slowing. I insist. The doors opened with a slow exhale, heavy enough that the sound alone seemed to hush the chamber beyond. Tharn entered first. His steps were measured, each one echoing softly off the polished floor of black stone veined with crimson light. The great hall beyond curved inward like a hollow ribcage, its ceiling lost to shadow, its walls alive with faintly pulsing runes. The air carried a metallic chill, the taste of candle smoke and old iron. At the far end of the room stretched a long, crescent table of obsidian, wide enough to seat 12. Only 5 sat there now, their silhouettes carved sharp against the dim light. The rest of the seats stood empty, silent reminders of absences that were never discussed aloud. None rose as Tharn approached. Closest to him sat 2 figures intertwined. The twins. The sister perched languidly upon her brother's lap, her legs crossed, one arm draped loosely over his shoulders. She leaned close as he whispered something unheard, her lips brushing the edge of his ear in a gesture that might have been affection or threat. Their mirrored smiles shifted in perfect rhythm, eyes gleaming like cut glass as they watched Tharn approach. Further down the table, a veiled woman reclined in her chair, fingers tracing idle patterns through the thin haze of smoke curling from an incense bowl before her. Beside her sat a pale man with regal posture, his hands folded neatly upon the table's surface, eyes unreadable beneath the faint shimmer of rune light. At the center, the deepest shadow hid the final presence, vast, still, and patient. The rest of the seats stood empty, silent reminders of absences never spoken of aloud. Tharn offered a courteous bow of the head. Apologies for our lateness. The light in the chamber seemed to falter as Celine crossed the threshold. Her gown swept behind her like a trail of smoke, each step unhurried, precise. The faint click of her heels filled the room with the quiet rhythm of inevitability. She stopped before the table, the pale gleam of the runes catching the gold embroidery of her dress. Tharn stepped close beside her, leaning in as though sharing a secret. His voice was low, smooth as wine. Good luck, my lady. Celine's smile ghosted across her lips, a blade wrapped in silk. Then I'll make sure they don't forget it again. Tharn took his seat at her right, folding his hands neatly atop the table. The faint creak of his chair broke the stillness. Celine let her gaze drift across the 5 assembled figures, slow, deliberate, and predatory. A soft rustle passed through the room, the shifting of fabric, the faint click of a ring against glass. The veiled woman was the first to speak. Her voice, low and melodic, carried the faintest edge of irritation. Still playing your games, Celine? I asked for progress, tell us. Have your little pets found anything of worth, or are they still chasing shadows? You almost let one take a piece from you. Celine's lips curved faintly. Ah, Nyx, she said, savoring the name as if tasting it. Always so quick to cut through the pleasantries. You'll be pleased to know progress is indeed being made. My pets are on the trail of a fragment even now. Nyx leaned forward, the light catching the edge of her veil. And yet here you stand, waiting, while some of us are doing the dirty work. Celine's eyes gleamed. Patience, dear. I already have Mother, Corin, and Lysandra moving toward another piece. Soon we'll have 3 in hand. You can rest your nerves. The twins laughed softly at that, their voices overlapping in perfect harmony. The sister, still perched in her brother's lap, brushed a hand along his jaw, whispering something against his ear that drew a smile. 2 pieces? 4 pieces? What does it matter? The brother murmured lazily. The world burns either way. His sister giggled. And she'll burn with it. Perhaps that's why she's so calm. Celine ignored them both, though her smile deepened ever so slightly. Tharn's voice broke the moment with practiced ease. You mentioned progress, my lady. Perhaps a demonstration might soothe the doubt? Celine turned her gaze toward him, then beyond, to the pale man seated 2 chairs down. "Yes," she said softly. "I suppose some among us crave reassurance." The man met her eyes without a flicker of emotion. "We all do." Celine raised her hand and the air shimmered around her fingers. From the space between her palms, darkness coalesced, twisting, condensing, until something solid rested there. She placed it upon the table with care. The shard was small, jagged, and alive with faint inner light. Its surface glowed with lines of molten gold, shifting like veins beneath translucent stone. The chamber fell silent. Even the twins paused their private game. Tharn studied it with polite curiosity, the faint reflection of the shard's glow dancing across his eyes. The pale man inclined his head slightly, approval or acknowledgement. Celine tilted her chin, her tone almost teasing. "Satisfied, Tharn? Corvallis?" A pause, then Corvallis's quiet reply. "For now." Nyx exhaled sharply, the sound halfway between annoyance and laughter. "For now," she repeated. The veiled woman fell silent, her dark eyes narrowing. The twins leaned close to each other again, whispering something that drew matching smirks. Then a voice from the far end of the table. Low, ancient, steady, continue. Every head bowed slightly, even Nyx's. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Celine inclined her head toward the darkness where he sat. "As you wish." Celine's fingers brushed the edge of the shard, and the faint light within it pulsed once, as though the thing recognized her touch. She lifted it from the table, holding it before her eyes. The golden veins within swirled sluggishly, like liquid caught in starlight. Then, without a word, she slipped it into the folds of her gown. The air seemed to draw taut around her. Silence settled over the chamber again, heavy, waiting. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, unhurried, the faintest smile shaping her words. "You all fret over progress," she said. "But rest assured, I have my eyes and ears where they need to be. My pawns are scattered, each in their place, collecting whispers and crushing distractions before they grow troublesome. The board is quite lively, I assure you." Nyx's veil shifted as she tilted her head, voice like smoke. "And what of the elf and the orc? Not our pieces." The tone was mocking, but the question hung sharp in the air. Celine met her gaze, that cruel amusement glinting beneath the calm. "Ah, my pets," she said, as if the word itself were a joke. "They serve a purpose, unwitting perhaps, but useful all the same. They dig through the dirt I no longer wish to touch. If they happen to find something of value, I'll know. And if they vanish from the board," her lips curved, "then the world continues turning. As it always does." Nyx gave a soft laugh, low, musical, and utterly without warmth, poetic. "Pawns that don't even know they're yours. Let's hope they stay ignorant, for your sake." Celine's smile didn't fade. "If ignorance is a virtue, then they are saints." Nyx's laugh turned to a dry chuckle, muffled beneath her veil. "How fortunate." The tension between them was thick enough to taste, but before either could speak again, a voice stirred from the far end of the table. "Enough." The Pale King's words were neither loud nor harsh, yet the sound seemed to fill every corner of the room. Even the flickering runes dimmed at his tone. "All of you will continue as you were," he said. "The pieces are moving, and time remains our ally. Let the course play itself out." Celine inclined her head slowly, the faintest bow. "Of course." When she extended her hand across the table, a gesture meant to charm, to test, the shadows deepened around him. Her fingers touched only cold air. Her smile didn't waver, but a sliver of amusement gleamed behind her eyes. To her right, the twins were already on their feet, pushing, laughing, their giggles echoing off the stone as they stumbled toward the door, still whispering to each other in tones only they understood. Their laughter trailed after them like ghosts. Nyx lingered a moment longer. Her stare was long and sharp, piercing through Celine's composure. Her chair slid backward with a scrape of stone. She sank into her shadow, her form dissolving in a shimmer of smoke until only the faint outline of her hand remained, then nothing at all. The room fell silent once more. Only Tharn and the Corvallis remained. Tharn rose with careful grace, smoothing the front of his coat. "Well," he murmured, glancing sidelong at Celine. "That went rather well, all things considered." Corvallis didn't rise immediately. His gaze lingered on Celine, calm, unreadable, yet heavy with unspoken thought. Finally, he stood and gave a small, respectful nod. "Do not mistake tolerance for trust, Lady Celine." Her answering smile was pure silk and venom. "I wouldn't dream of it." Corvallis turned and left in silence, the echo of his footsteps fading into the dark corridor beyond. When the doors closed behind him, Tharn exhaled softly, his composure unbroken. "They hang on your every word," he said. Celine's eyes lingered on the spot where the pale man had sat. The air there still rippled faintly, as though his presence had left an imprint. Celine remained still for a long moment after the doors shut, her gaze fixed on the empty chairs across the table. The flickering runelight caught the curve of her cheek, tracing the faint smile that lingered there, thoughtful, cold. Her voice came softly. Seats were empty. She turned her head slightly toward Tharn. "Besides Mother, why didn't the others grace us with their presence?" Tharn had been watching the lingering curl of incense drifting through the air, but her question drew a faint, genuine laugh from him, low and smooth, echoing gently through the vast chamber. "Lady Celine," he said with mock astonishment, "asking me for information? Now there's a rare sight." She arched an eyebrow, that ghost of a smile never fading. "Don't mistake curiosity for humility, Tharn. I simply prefer to know when our allies begin to wander without permission." Tharn leaned back slightly in his chair, folding one leg over the other with easy grace. The candlelight caught in his eyes, intelligent, sharp, quietly entertained. "They've been sent into the field," he said at last. "Each of them. Different corners, same purpose. I told you, some want this to move faster." Celine tilted her head, the gold trim of her gown catching the light like liquid fire. "Restless," she whispered. Her gaze drifted back to the table, the cold obsidian gleam of it, the faint ring of light still pulsing where the shard had rested moments before. For an instant, something unreadable crossed her expression. Then she exhaled softly, almost a purr. "So the game broadens." Tharn rose, the motion fluid and deliberate, and extended a hand as though offering to escort her from the room. "It always does, my lady." Celine looked up at him, her smile slow and serpentine. She did not take his hand, but she did stand. "Then let's see who moves first," she said. The two of them turned toward the great doors, their footsteps echoing through the chamber as the light dimmed behind them. The runes along the walls faded one by one, until the hall was swallowed again by silence and shadow. And in that silence, faintly, a heartbeat pulsed beneath the stone.
Thank you for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe. More chapters are on the way.